We're live. Fun times. Welcome to Scruffy City Aquatics live stream. I'm Mitch. I have Tanner with me as normal. Tanner, what's up?
Oh, just hanging out, watching the tank from the couch. So it's always a
Oh,
good
that's nice.
Tuesday night live stream. Looks
Yeah,
like we've
my tank's behind me.
yeah, I've got the perfect angle. It's like right there. So I'm just
Yeah,
glancing over, keeping an eye on everybody, and trying to relax a little bit on this Tuesday night
well,
stream.
yeah. Well, um, we're in just a couple minutes late, and part of that is because my internet dropped. So if it drops again, it might be an issue tonight. The other issue is StreamYard is not allowing me to load the images that I had ready to go. So what I was working on right before the show, so that we would have it, is not available to us. That's okay. We'll make do. We'll make this happen.
Looks like we've
I
already got
th-
TJ Autocross in the chat.
What's up,
Thanks for
TJ?
joining. Basement Aquatics with Dave. Thanks for joining. Mexicali Keeper. Thank y'all for joining us tonight. Always good to see y'all in the chat. Red Laser just joined as well. Thanks for hanging out with us on this Tuesday evening. Hope you're all doing well.
Hard to believe it's already Tuesday, election day. People
Yes,
aren't
yeah.
watching election coverage, huh?
I think I'd rather watch our stream.
I'm with you. I'm with you.
But yes, it has been already a busy week. So glad to have some time to hang out with everybody tonight and kind of take a break. Nancy
Yeah.
B in Tennessee, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Nancy. I am just working behind the scenes a little bit, trying to see if I can figure out another way to bring this up. So sorry, this is not the best live stream material, but I'm getting there. Let's
Well,
see.
while Mitch is working on that, I want to go ahead and thank everybody on the replay crew. Thanks for joining us after the stream has ended. We always appreciate everybody who comments on the streams. So thanks for joining us on the replay crew. Definitely, if you've got a question, Mitch and I always try to look at the comments periodically. I don't get the notifications, but I believe Mitch does if he's
Yeah,
got
I
them
do.
turned on. So one of us will see it and we'll try and help you out. Looks like we've got the Zen Ginger, one of our wonderful mod. Thankful for everything she does.
I learned something this week that I can go over into, well, it only gives me top chat. Oh, there it is, live chat. I can go over into YouTube and actually click on participants and see the lurkers.
Oh,
That's fun. I've heard people read off the participants list, but I didn't know what that was. Now I do.
huh. Let me go on over to YouTube and see if I can. I probably can't check that out, but
Yeah, I doubt it. I don't think so. All right. So yeah, plans, best laid plans, gone. So we will attempt to do this without the images, and so we'll just have to be very descriptive in our discussion. Um, it has been wow. It's been a whole week since we did this. Uh, I
mhm.
ended up I ended up sick. I think we discussed the fact that one of my family members had the flu last week, so I ended up sick last week and missed out on a few days. But thankfully, that flu shot that I got at work kept me from having to deal with too much. I was well within a couple of days, I feel. But everybody else, there's a little bit of sickness still hanging in there. It's been quite frustrating for the rest of the family, but we're gonna get there.
Yeah, there's definitely. I mean, it's the time of year where a lot's going around. I know quite a few people who are getting a bit of the sniffles and flu, unfortunately. Uh,
Yeah,
looks like
it's
we've
that
got
time of year.
Jimmy P's Aquariums. Says he's here to say his weekly hello. Good to see you as
What's
well,
up,
Jimmy.
Jimmy? Awesome to have you always.
Yes.
Nancy B said, "Oh, here I can bring it up. I can bring it up. At least I can do that." Which I have different algae in each tank. I can look around and probably find whatever y'all bring up. Yeah, I've been there. And that's the thing. You rarely just have. I mean, you often have multiple, right? Even sometimes in the same tank. So we're going to talk a little bit about why that might be, why that happens. Craig's Catfish Cave is here. I don't understand why this won't let me load this presentation. I can't stand for something like that to beat me. Like technology cannot beat me. Has anybody else been in a live stream where they were having problems? I guess you don't know if they're using StreamYard or not. Let's see if I can bring up my software and I can probably switch between these or something. Tanner, let's see, we had a live stream since our meetings, right?
Yeah, this is we
This is the first one since.
both clubs, the East Tennessee Aquatic Association as well as the Music City Aquarium Society, had meetings this past Saturday. And I know the East Tennessee meeting went well from what I've heard. The Music City meeting went very well. Also had a little bit lower attendance, which I'm attributing to the weather as well as the UT game being at the
We're not talking
same
about that.
time as our
We're not allowed to
meeting.
talk about that.
We're not gonna. That's all we're gonna say about it. But yeah, the meetings went very well. I was excited to see some returning faces as well as some new people at the Music City. We've got Cheryl Green in the chat. She has now been at both of the Music City meetings. So thanks for joining us tonight, Cheryl. Always great to see you at the meetings. I actually ended up getting some beautiful Golden Wonder Killies in our club auction that
Yeah, you sent me a picture of
they
those.
brought. Really cool fish that I hadn't kept before. I know they're pretty popular, but just something I hadn't seen in person before. So pretty excited to have those. Um, our presenter was Sarah Walker, and she actually did collection and keeping of native Florida killifish, which was an incredible presentation. She'd gone to Florida, I think, this past year, and had a lot of really cool photos from her trip and had a lot of cool insights and knowledge on collecting fish. Can't do that in Tennessee, unfortunately. You can collect them and look at them, but you can't take them home. So that was definitely cool to see another part of the U.S. and what all is out there.
Yeah, Cheryl's saying that she made her want to go to Florida. And I know we have a member as well, Curtis, who
Mhm.
often goes to Florida and he does some fishing and collecting and he tells a lot of stories. And he's gone a couple of times since I've met him. And I don't know, it's something I'd really like to do for sure.
Yeah, I would definitely like to do that at some point because there's just so many cool species. A lot of the common types of fish you see typically kept in aquariums, you'll find down there in Florida. Um, so definitely something that I want to do eventually, maybe next summer. Who knows? Probably not in the summer. It's a little warm down there. Might avoid it
Yeah,
then.
it would be a fun trip. I would want to go with someone who's been a few times, kind of increase the chances of success.
I went to Florida this past, I want to say spring, and I was not successful. Um,
Oh,
probably
right. I remember that.
probably was in the wrong areas and was also pretty far south where it was very little fresh water. So
Yeah.
unfortunately, I did not. I came up empty-handed, but it was still fun. It's just really cool being out in the environment that fish um, actually live in versus just seeing them in a tank. I always think it's awesome just to see them in their natural, um, out in the wild, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah, and we are actually trying to plan a collection event. I don't think we get to keep anything, but with a club up in Kentucky, We've discussed it. It's not like in stone or anything, but we've said we would be interested in doing that. So um, looking forward to that. We also have Derek, who's been on the live stream with us, works at Conservation Fisheries, and they do collecting with where they'll take people out with them. And so we plan on trying to do something like that this year as well.
Yeah,
So
that's
that'll be a
awesome.
good time.
I've gone out and snorkeled in creeks and whatnot before and looked at the little darters, and it's always so much fun.
See,
Just
I've never even done that. I've never snorkeled in the, I grew up on the lake and hanging out on the lake, but I've never tried to snorkel in it. I don't think you could see very far, but in the streams and stuff, I've never tried that.
it's really cool. There's I think it's the Conasauga River um, on the Georgia Tennessee border that's got
Hmm.
a huge population of different darters. That's just the underwater world that exists right below you. It's just incredible to see. Um,
Yeah.
but if you don't know already, Mitch and I really like the clubs. So if you've got a local club, check them out because it just adds a whole aspect of community to your hobby, which I really enjoy. Just interacting with other people and really learning a lot from so many different people. It's just an awesome experience.
Yeah, we had a great time too. It was, it was down a little bit with the UT game going on at the same time as the meeting. Um, but we had a good turnout. We had a lot of fun. Ended up leaving with a extremely large um, swordtail that I was not expecting to bring home. So I'm having to keep an eye on it for a little bit just to make sure things are a okay before it's living in the 75. But the it's going to be awesome. It's a huge fish. And then this week I also had, or Saturday on my, like I was getting ready to leave for the club and I started finding Cory eggs. So I was collecting Cory eggs. I ended up with like 40 something Cory eggs. And there were still more. And there were about 20 when I got home that were on the back glass hidden behind a leaf. And I thought I'd try to leave them and just see if it happened. It didn't. They're gone now. But yes, they started hatching today. This is the third day, which that tank's not 80 degrees. That tank's a little bit cooler. So from what I understand, 80 degrees, you should be able to hatch them in a couple of days. But there's at least 6 swimming around in there right now.
Awesome. That's always fun. Corys always start spawning when you do not want them to. It's
Yeah,
never at the most convenient time. It's like, oh, I'm about to go to bed. What is
yeah.
that?
Well,
Cory eggs on the glass. Oh, I got to leave for work. What is that? Cory eggs on the glass.
yeah, that last batch that I raised up that I've actually still got in that tank, they interrupted my work. I was working and I went by and saw them and I thought, well, I'm gonna have to get those on my break. And just so happened I had to walk back through there again. And when I did, I saw that some of them were like half of them were gone. I was like, nope. And I went and logged out and collected for a little bit. That's in the video. Actually, I did a video on that. But it's a lot of fun. I like it's the first non-live bear that I've bred. So I mean, with live bears, I mean you got to feed them right and keep the water
Yeah.
nice, and that's it. But with these, it's a little more work. So I'm enjoying the practice because once I do expand to a few more tanks, I'm hoping to keep a few different species, a few different things, and I know these Corys are a little bit easier than everything else. So it's good practice.
Yeah.
And tomorrow will be a challenge because I'm not working from home. And tomorrow's when they should feed for the first time, at least the 6 that have been swimming today. Isn't that how we did it? The second days when you fed? That's what I did, I believe.
Yeah. I normally throw in like a big clump of Java moss or something that's been in an
Yeah, I did
established
that.
tank. So at least there's sort of those micro
Yeah.
invertebrates and microfauna that they can eat in case you can't feed. I actually made it about 3 days when I was out of town with some Cory fry that had
Yeah.
were probably about a week old. I didn't feed for 3 days, threw a ton of plants in there, and they were completely fine. So,
Yeah. I'll do
but
that. I did put some in there, but it's been in there for a couple of days, and I put a cherry shrimp in there, and I know that the shrimp has been on there on the moss. So I'll throw a little more in there before I leave tomorrow.
yeah, Corey, you were saying earlier that Corey's were the first non-live bear that you ever successfully bred, and that's the same exact for me. Basically, you
Yeah.
had your green Corys, and I had my bronze Corys. The first thing I ever
Yeah.
successfully raised up. I'm kind of in the same boat. I'm not really done. I've got some breeding sort of projects I'm working on, but I'm
Yeah.
still not. I haven't figured it out fully.
Right. No, it definitely, that first spawn that I had was a disaster, and I still don't know what happened. Um, they all died, and I can't tell you why. From what I can tell, I did everything right. I'm sure I did something wrong. I just don't know what it was, but didn't go well. And then the second one, I ended up with just like 4 or 5 of them, and I put them in 75 too early, and I only have one now of that first. So it was the third batch that I got almost 30 out of, and I've given 12 of those away, and I've still got more than a dozen in there. Some of those will be going over to the tank, and the rest of them I've got to figure out what to do with them.
Yeah, I think with breeding fish, you sort of just kind of like keeping aquariums in general. It's you're gonna bumble through it at first,
Yeah.
and you're gonna mess things up, and you can read and research as much as possible, but until you start doing it and get comfortable with it, I think it's a challenge.
This is true. It's a lot of fun though. I really do enjoy. I had to try it again. I had to see if I could load that. But it is a lot of fun to try and figure out. I'm looking forward to um, I'm sure because they're live bears. Sure the swordtails will begin to breed, and I'm looking forward to that. I've actually got 2 different types, so I'm going to get kind of a mixture. I'm sure. I didn't realize it at first. These were so I've got the large swordtail, but I already had some swordtails that haven't been in a video or anything yet. Actually, they have been in a video, but I've not pointed them out. I ended up with them after the swap, and it was unintentional. They were left. Someone had donated them to the table. Nobody else was willing to take them. I was like, well, I like live bears. I'll take them. These won't breed with my mollies, right? And I got the no, these won't breed with mollies, and they don't. They would cross over with platies, I believe, but not mollies. And so I brought them home, and I knew where they came from. I knew the tank that they came out of. They're Curtis's, and I was comfortable just putting them in the 75, and they've been doing great. What I didn't realize was there was 2 different types, and I must have had more than one bag and didn't realize it, because I have like a standard red, and there's 3 females and a male that all look really good. And then or maybe it's 2 females and a male. And then there's 2 what he called pineapple swordtails, and they're just awesome looking. But they were tiny. Oh, I'm over here. They were tiny. They're just now starting to mature, and I was able to see this week that one of them's a male and one of them's a female. So we'll see what happens there.
Yeah, those pineapple swordtails are really cool colors.
Yeah, it is. It's a cool looking fish. It's almost like it's almost a natural looking fish. It's like a wild looking fish to some extent, because the coloring is really cool, but it's not, it's not that bright color that you expect to see in a fish store.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think the further I get in the aquariums, the more I've started to enjoy the natural colored
Yeah,
fish, and the ones that just have the subtle, coloration, but it's more muted and just
right.
I don't know. It looks really cool.
Yeah.
Just the
Although
way
I
that
would
they
tell
swim
you,
around the tank. But
I will
I am
probably.
sort of flashy fish too.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. I'm probably gonna do some scarlet batis if I ever get another tank, because you've sold me on that fish. As a matter of fact, I saw that Dan's fish, is it Dan's Fish Tank Barn, the one that Steam Fought Aquatics always, he's got a link to. I know Zen Ginger knows whether or not I'm right. Actually, she may not know, but I believe she would know. He has a sale going on right now, and I think you can stack Bob's discount on top of that. Don't hold me to that. I don't know for certain, but he had Scarlet Baddis on there, and I was like, "Oh, let's check this out." But he did confirm that they were all males. He did not think any of them were females.
It's very, very rare to find a female, and I'm still working on mine, trying to get them to breed. They've spawned before. I've seen eggs. They just didn't get it right. But
Yeah.
that's something. If anyone in the chat has ever bred Scarlet Baddis, please let me know what you're doing because I was lucky enough to find a female and I have not been successful yet.
Yeah. I watched a video not long ago on it. I'll see if I can find that and shoot that to you. I know some have done it. I saw that Liquid Zoo is here. Hello, Matt. Fishfam.link. Everyone check that out. We haven't mentioned it yet on this live stream. So, a great resource. If you enjoy this live stream and other live streams, there's plenty of live streams that are available for you there. And I saw some, Ray Aquatics. Ray Aquatics is also here. Hello, Ray.
And looks like we've also got Liquid Zoo. I don't know if you mentioned
Yeah,
Liquid
that's
Zoo.
Matt.
Oh, okay, I'm
And,
sorry.
yeah. Nope, you're good. And Regina Phalanges is here. Chat's moving.
Welcome. It is moving. I'm trying to keep up and read through it.
Oh, yeah, Zen Ginger did answer me. I don't know if you can stack Bob's code either. Yeah, I'm not sure. I know that his post in his community tab mentioned that there's a sale and also said, oh, yeah, if it's your first purchase from Dan's website, you get the additional 10%. So that reads like it stacks to me. I don't know, but that's how it reads. Because Bob also said, if it's not your first time, thank you for using the link anyway, if you would. So it was nice. Let's see. I think we're caught up. Silver Creek's here. What's up, Silver Creek?
Yeah, welcome, Silver Creek. Thanks for joining us.
All right. We're going to talk about, we're caught up, I think. We're going to talk about algae. And I'm going to bring this up on screen. And I apologize. It's not exactly what I wanted, but I'm going to just share my screen. And if I actually put it up, I lose the ability to see everything else because I work with one monitor and I need to fix that. There's a few things I need to do in order to get this live streaming to work a little bit easier. That's one of them. But we're just going to have to work off a Keynote so that we have the information, because really this conversation that we've talked about having, I really want to have the pictures up for people to see and for us to be able to point to and talk about. So
it's definitely a very visual conversation. The visual aid helps quite a bit when talking about good old algae.
yeah. So algae is one of those things that when you get into the hobby, you never want it. And then at some point you realize that everybody gets it. Everybody has algae. There's no way around it. Even the top tanks, like even the most pristine tank has algae somewhere. It has some. It's not in your face, it's not killing off plants. There is this balance that has to take place in order for you to get the tank where you want it. But all tanks are going to have a little bit of algae. Algae is not necessarily a bad thing. That's part of what we're going to talk about. So when we name this, when we were talking about it when we got off the live stream last week, and Tanner was like, we should call it Algae Happens. And I was like, ooh, I already have a logo for that because I put it on a shirt. So Algae Happens is the title for the next few live streams, probably 3. We'll see if it goes over that. We might do one more where we just have people send us pictures of algae or something. We can maybe talk about it. I don't know. We'll see. I think that would be fun. Big Shrimpin' is here. Hello. And but this episode 1, is the intro to algae and should we fear it. I thought we should definitely take a moment to talk about that in this conversation, because it's real easy to to you know to have a burn it all down mentality when it comes to algae. I know there's times in my hobby very early on where it was like that. I didn't want to dose in my tank because I didn't want to have algae. Well, then I killed all my plants. I didn't want to leave my light on too long because I didn't want algae. Well, I killed my plants. There's a number of things. Oh no, I have some algae. I'm going to take everything out and scrub it down. Oh no, I have algae. I need to stop fertilizing. Oh no, I need to turn my lights down. There's algae. All this stuff. It's the things that many of us have gone through, and some are maybe considering, and that maybe that's why they came across this live stream and many other videos and live streams that are out there looking for answers, because I know I did. I was all over the internet looking for answers. What do I do? I don't want this brown stuff in my tank. What should I do about it? And the number one, if you don't hear anything else, I'll just say calm down. It's
Yeah.
okay. It's going to be all right. We talked about it when we talked about fertilizers. Small changes. We make small changes and we steer in the right direction, and it'll all be good. The algae's not bad. It's not what we want to look at, for sure. It's not what we want to see when we look at our tanks, but it's just going to be around for a little while until we work things out.
Yeah, definitely. And aquariums are just a patience. I mean, it's a hobby of patience. You're not going to go from, like Mitch was saying, small changes. You're not going to go from algae ridden tank to pristine by the next morning. There's no magic cure all for algae. It's all about finding a balance within your tank. And, even a lot of those like contest tanks that you would see, they don't look that great 98% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
They go through massive maintenance and stage it for photos and everything. So, I mean, those show tanks like that, they do get algae too. It's algae, just it's everywhere. The name of the game is trying to minimize the algae.
Exactly. Hey, I noticed that Stephen P is here. Welcome, Stephen P. Thanks for joining us. And also Vibes Aquatics. It's good to have you, Vibes. And he asked what was cracking. And Dave says his joints are cracking. I can feel that sometimes. Talking about algae, when we talk about what is algae in our tanks, right? What is this stuff that's shown up? What is taking over my plants? What's on the glass? What's on the rocks? What is that black hairy stuff growing on that piece of wood? Maybe what is that white film? Some people might think that might be algae as well. What is this stuff that's there that is standing out that I don't want in my aquarium? I want to enjoy the fish. I want to enjoy the colors. I want to enjoy the plants. I don't want to see algae. Get rid of it. The thing about algae is a lot of times it's several things, and even some of the more common algae that we experience in the hobby, we'll call them something like, we'll call it green spot algae, or we'll call it green hair algae, staghorn algae. But oftentimes, even that is not just one type of algae. There's not just like 8 species of algae that we deal with. There's literally, I don't know that I should use the term literally, because like I said, I'm not a rocket scientist. There's probably thousands of them.
Yeah.
And anytime you have algae, you probably have a makeup of several that you're seeing. It's just whichever one is growing the best is the one that you're going to see the most. You're going to see those properties.
Yeah, definitely. And whenever people say, "Oh, that's hair algae," it just kind of groups it into a class of based on how it looks. We're
Right.
not identifying the exact type of hair algae because there's hundreds likely. It's just kind of grouping it. There's general ways you treat different types of algae.
Yeah,
But there's
and
also
that's why we
common
have.
ways to address all of them.
Right. That's what I was going to say. And that's why we have to be careful when prescribing a treatment for someone on what to do if you get an algae. Because a lot of times when we're on these forums, or when we're on Facebook, somebody will post, like I saw one the other day, somebody posted some white film on a piece of driftwood. And there were people like, "Oh, it's algae. You need to start using Excel." And it's like, no, that's biofilm. That's just a new
Right.
piece of wood. Don't start treating your tank with stuff. And there are some bottle solutions out there, right? And they can help with certain things, but they're not always the answer. I can tell you from experience, you don't always need to wrap your tank up and make it dark for 2 weeks. You don't always need to dip everything in hydrogen peroxide for a minute. you don't always need to do these things. You need to do small corrections. So that's because. So let's talk about why is it algae does get in our tanks or does get a hold of our tanks or starts to grow in the tank, and that's because it's just better at what it does than your plants. That's what it boils down to. It's a single cell organism that is able to use photosynthesis to get its energy, and that means it's going to use the nutrients and the light and even the CO2 possibly, but the energy and the lights definitely that you're putting in your tank to grow plants. It's better at using them, and if unless your plants are growing optimally. And what that is to say is if your plants are getting the right amount and dialed in the right amount of the three things, the CO2, the nutrients and the light, then your plants are going to outcompete algae. But if any of those things are out of whack, if whatever is limiting you, if something is in a place where, most of us are limited because we do, low tech, what we call low tech tanks. Most of us are limited by our CO2. That's our number one limitation. Even the cheaper lights are giving you enough light. It's that your CO2 is not strong. You don't have enough CO2 for the plants to be able to continue to grow and produce the energy. So the CO2 cuts us off. Well, if you have too much light, but the CO2 is the wall, well, guess what? Now the algae is able to use the light because the plants aren't going to. If you have too much fertilizer, not enough light, well, the algae is going to be able to use the fertilizer more easily because the plants are, again, there's a wall there. So that's why you have like the triangle of the three things that you need to find a balance of. And that's how you get rid of algae. That's how you, or not get rid of it, but limit algae. You limit it by finding a balance between those things. What's my maximum CO2 under my current situation? Or if I want to, have a system where I'm adding to it, what's my maximum lighting? A lot of times what I found, what worked for me was simply turning my lights down. My lights were too strong when I didn't have enough CO2 in my water. And, could have also been fertilizer. I was still dialing in fertilizer at the time. And we've talked about this when we were talking about plants and fertilizer. If you've just put a brand new plant in, it could take it a few days before it's ready to start using nutrients. So if you're throwing more nutrients into the water, you're actually promoting algae instead of that plant growth.
Right, definitely. One way that I've really liked the limiting factor concept to be explained is it's like you're baking a cake. You've got a
Mhm.
recipe. So you've got enough ingredients. You only need a cup of flour. Say you have 10 cups of flour. You need 2 eggs. You only have 3 eggs. So you can only bake that one cake, and then you need more of something else. You have excess of other things, and that would be your lighting, your nutrients. Because typically, like Mitch said, in a low tech tank, CO2 is your limiting factor. Well, in a high tech tank, CO2, if you're dosing it properly, then there's no limiting factor with that. So it narrows it down to nutrients and lighting. You've got to have that balance of all three, or else you give algae the chance to take hold. Because, like Mitch was saying, it grows so much faster than plants. Single cell, it takes less time to reproduce or grow. Um, so it's definitely just balancing. It's a balancing act.
Yeah, and we don't like the look of it. Or actually, some people do. There's some algae that are actually kind of cool looking. Kane shared in the Facebook group for the ETAA not long ago a video of somebody who had a comb going through some algae that was growing on the surface of their tank, and it was honestly pretty cool looking. It was a nice carpet of hair algae that, I mean, it looked great. So there are times that you might want it or like it. I've heard of some people liking blackbeard algae, and I don't know what's wrong with those people, but that's a thing apparently. But
That's probably the worst algae. There are
in
tanks
my
I
opinion,
have purposefully. There's several tanks that I've purposefully grown algae, but I would never want blackbeard. I don't know
no. Once
why.
it's there,
Yeah,
I don't
it's
know that you can
just
get rid of it once it's there.
there's only a couple ways I found, but
Yeah,
it's just a
it's
pain.
always waiting. It's like duckweed. It's always waiting for its opportunity. Um, But we do want to point out that algae is not bad for your aquarium. It's actually good for your aquarium. We just don't like the look of it. Because algae is a single cell organism that's using photosynthesis, that means it's absorbing nutrients and adding oxygen to your water. Now, at night, it actually takes oxygen out, but just like your plants do. But it is still helping with the filtration of your aquarium. It's not a bad thing to have. And in a new aquarium, it's actually good to have a little bit of algae. It's going to give you a little bit more of a buffer as you're getting things started. So we wanted to point that out, that it's not necessarily a bad thing. You shouldn't fear it. You don't want it to you don't want it to overrun your tank. You don't want it to become so unsightly that you're ready to pack everything up and be done with it. You don't want to get to that point, but a little bit of algae is normal, and don't fear it.
Definitely. And it can also be beneficial for some of your livestock. Um,
Hmm.
Things like
Yeah.
shrimp. In the shrimp tanks I have, I try to grow as much. If they're not meant for the plants, I grow as much algae as possible, just because those shrimp love to graze in it. It gives
Yeah.
hiding spots, and it just has good. It really cultivates all of those that microfauna for things to eat on.
Well, you were talking about it with the Cory fry. It's absolutely true. You could use algae for that as well. Live bears. I've kept mollies for years. Mollies will snack on algae.
Yeah.
When I'm gone for a week and they're not getting fed, when I come back, tanks never look better because they gave up the steak and went for the salad. They knew the steak wasn't coming, so might as well eat this green stuff. And it's good. It's good for them to have that in their diet too. So there's a number of reasons why it's good. Did you have anything else on kind of the intro before we just look at a few common algae?
No, I think everything else we can just sort of get into with this, if that works.
Okay. I keep wanting to call it algae and see if anybody says anything.
Algae.
I know some, I mean, I'm sure that's the right way to say it, but I just can't do it.
That algae, the good old the southern algae.
Algae.
Algae doesn't sound right to
It
me,
sounds too cute. It sounds like something you want in your tank.
yeah.
All right, let's see if I can break this by changing the page. I can't figure out another way to do this other than to bring up the navigation. So I'll have to do that and then I'll hide it. So the first one, I'm gonna see how many times I can say so. The first one we want to talk about is your brown. Can we see that? I don't have my screen on us. Yeah, it's there.
Yeah.
And I can
Yeah,
actually
I can
make
see
it bigger while we're talking about it. Let me do that real quick. All right, so brown algae is probably well, actually not probably. We've all experienced brown algae. Every single one of us. If you keep an aquarium, you had some brown algae at some point. And I see people a lot of times online, and I try to respond to these as quickly as possible before someone gives them some kind of bogus. You need to take it out and scrub it off, or you need to go and change your filtration. Oh, you only have a 75, you need a filter for 110. People start giving bad information because someone's a little worried about some brown algae. And it's also known as diatom algae. And
it.
I've often heard it called new tank algae. And I think that's how we should refer to it.
Yeah.
It's new tank algae. You have a new setup, organisms are beginning to grow in your tank. Your soup is starting to come together. You're going to have algae. That's a good sign. It means the nutrients are there. It means the life is there. Things are able to live in your tank. This will go away. It doesn't last very long. I think it lasts about a week typically. If it
Mhm.
lasts any longer than that, you might have an issue. But
Yeah, I've had a couple weeks into setups, and that really just depends on kind of what all you have in the tank. But it's the way I view diatom algae. It's one of the most simplistic types of
mhm,
algae, so it grows the fastest, but it also can get outcompeted very easily by
yep.
green algae and like hair algae and things like that. So it's just a phase of your tank. It won't last like that forever. I think there is um, some documents that say that high silicate content, with your depending on the sand you use, could cause brown algae or diatoms, but I don't know that for sure. But yeah, it's just really just part of the cycling phase, and it really, like Mitch said, you're on the right track.
Yeah, it will eventually get like you said, it'll eventually start to be outcompeted by your plants. If you don't, if this tank doesn't have plants, then you're probably going to deal with it a little bit longer. Um, you can, as far as how to get rid of it, my recommendation is don't just let it run its course. You can though, if you have a good amount of this already growing in your tank, then you could go ahead and start getting some algae eaters. You know, you could have some autos now. Shrimp, probably a good idea. I wouldn't get them in the quantities to get rid of it because you kind of want, you know, those things to build up. Not necessarily the brown algae, but you know, but it does mean an auto is probably going to be able to eat for a few days. Um, then you're going to start having to give it give it
Yeah.
wafers. But it is a
I've
little bit of food for those type.
I've found that shrimp and other, invertebrates or algae eaters, that's one of their favorite types to eat.
Hmm.
Snails will just decimate diatom algae. It's really cool to see how fast they move through it because it is such just it's like a dust almost.
Yeah, the mystery snails when they find a big patch of it and go through it, and they're just like mowing through it, and their heads just going back, their mouth, not their head, their mouth's going back and forth along the glass, just getting every little bite and leaving a trail. That's fun. It's a fun time. Let's see here. So yeah, just leave this one, let it grow, it'll go away. All right. Here's one that I have heard a lot of people worry about. I've never worried about this one. No, that's not true. I take it back. So green water. Green water happens when you have algae that is growing in the water column. So this is free floating algae. When someone gets this is typically pretty difficult to get rid of, my understanding. And what so I originally said it's not one that I fear. It is one I feared in the beginning because I saw pictures of this and I was like, oh, if that happens, my wife's going to make me throw this thing out. She's not going to put up with this green tank. And then I come to realize, come to learn that some people try to grow green algae because they want green water to feed,
Mhm.
you know, certain species. Um, but yeah, this is one I've never had to deal with, but I did fear in the beginning. These pictures, I did not want this.
Definitely. That's like the picture you see when you see a horror tank.
Yeah.
But it's really cool. Green water is pretty cool because it's a phytoplankton and it's essentially an algae bloom or algae bloom. Um, but fish and Daphnia, like the Zen Ginger said, love to eat this stuff. I know a lot of
Yep.
people that raise Daphnia cultures feed green water
Hmm.
constantly just to get them to really repopulate. But it's certainly it can be used as a food for fry and other things. It's pretty cool, but it's also one that I've tried to grow myself, and I just
Yep.
haven't been able to. I don't know if I'm not putting enough light to it or what, but it won't happen.
Yeah. And that's what I've heard. You've got some people who struggle to get rid of it, and then you have people who struggle to get it. And then you have those of us who are just oblivious. We don't have it. um, but yeah, the green water is something that I will have to research. I honestly don't know other than water changes and maybe turning down the light. Like you said, it really likes having that high light. I know people when people try to grow it, they put as like they turn their fluval 3.0 all the way up and put it on there, start throwing stuff in to get
Yeah,
nutrients in the water. So I would say maybe turn down the light and then also watch what you're putting in. Maybe don't feed as much. uh, yeah, we'll do some more research because we're going to dive into how to get rid of algae a little bit more in a future episode.
yeah. That's one of the ones that it's really hard to get rid of because they reproduce so fast. Because I mean,
Hmm.
it's basically an algae bloom, which in water systems, rivers and stuff, it can happen. Like in the oceans, there's algae blooms, and they just take
Yep.
over so fast. And
Yep.
generally, it's because of a lot of light and a whole lot of nutrients.
Yeah.
Um,
You know, I would think they would also, if you've already got fish in this tank, it would be important to get an air stone in here as well, because I would think they would the the algae would take up a lot of oxygen at night.
Yeah.
It could be at risk of um, just tanking your oxygen at night. So
Yeah, I
um,
mean, with that much mass in the water column, because I believe that's what's part of the harmful algae blooms out, like in oceans, is
yeah,
that
that's what
one
made me
issue
think
is
of
like
it.
they starve the oxygen out of the water and basically just decimate that area. So especially in such a small volume of water, you've got fish in there. I would definitely try to add some additional oxygen.
Hmm. All right, let's look at the next one. Oh, one thing. If you're listening to this and you have a bloom, but it's not green, maybe it's more of a just a hazy white. It's not algae. Okay, that's not algae. You've got a bacterial bloom. That's actually a good thing.
Yes.
Start checking your ammonia. You're cycling. You're on track. Make sure your ammonia doesn't get too high. Not algae. All right, this is inconvenient. All right, here's one I have had to deal with. I'm not a fan of, and that is green spot algae. And I should have found a picture of this on the glass because it's more commonly where it is,
Yeah.
where it shows up for me. I will say this: when green spot algae shows up on my glass, I don't consider it a big deal. I just scrub it off. What worries me is when it shows up on a plant. And at one point, the large Anubias that's in the 75 had it all over the leaves.
Mhm.
Um, and it did kill off that plant a little bit. That plant struggled a great deal because of that algae. And I could not scrape it off of the leaves, it would not come off.
Yeah, green spot algae is such a pain because it often shows up on your bigger epiphyte plants like the Anubias, like Bucephalandra, because they grow so much slower and they have that surface area,
Hmm.
which allows the green spot algae, and you can't scrape it off. Most of the time, if it gets bad enough, I'll just snip that leaf off, and then just that signals me to know that I need to start reducing light a little bit, maybe have a little less nutrients in the water.
And that was the hard lesson learned there is you just have to remove those leaves. You're just going to have to move on because there's no bringing them back. The algae's there; it doesn't let go.
Yeah, it's pretty difficult to get rid of on the plants. And it looks like Bunny Viper says, does temp have anything to do with it? They used to get blooms in their cold water goldfish tank all the time.
Is this the green water?
Yeah, it looks like they're referring to water. I don't know specifically about green water, but most of the things that I've read is that algae grows faster and can take over quicker at higher temperatures because it just
Yeah.
ramps the metabolism of the algae. It it takes out a limiting factor of temperature for the algae.
Yeah. And so the videos that I have seen where people were trying to grow green water, they did have the heat up. So I do believe that's a factor.
Yeah, because even bacteria grow at most bacteria grow significantly faster at a higher temperature. So kind
Yeah.
of a lot of those organisms, the higher the temp, the faster they'll grow. Just like your fish, they'll grow faster at higher temps.
Yeah. Missed this comment from squad captain number 4. I don't know that I should say number 4, but I did. Primetime Aquatics has talked about the Green Water Club outside of Chicago that loves green algae. Yeah, I know there's groups and Daphnia. I think that's key. There's a few other things that really like it. Also, we have Saints Dust Aquariums bleached a tank 3 times and still get a bloom in it every time I set it up. So now I just live with it and it just looks ugly. So I'm guessing this is green water. I wonder if there's like a window nearby or something that's giving you a hard time with that.
It could be, and I think someone in the comments suggested a UV sterilizer. I may have missed it though, but that is one
That's
good
right.
solution to a green water or a bloom because they are suspended. They're suspended within the water column, so they'll pass through that UV sterilizer, and then it will essentially kill the algae. But
Yeah, I've heard people adding UVs to take care of it. So the Zen Ginger says, I'm pretty sure I have black beard growing on the green spot in my Anubias. And that's what we were talking about earlier. That definitely does happen. I have had black beard and green spot on the same leaves or rocks, and probably also wood. It's kind of hard to see green spot on driftwood, but I know that has happened. And a lot of times that does. More than one type of algae will benefit from whatever's going on in your tank, the imbalance, and they'll grow side by side, intermingled.
Yeah,
Basement
definitely.
Aquatic says that looks familiar. It is. It's a picture you sent me. Thank you for that.
Typically with
Um,
stuff like that, like the rocks and driftwood, if it's not spreading to anything, I normally, for the most part, just leave it. It's really only the plants I don't want algae on, and that's kind of what we were talking about. With there's always going to be some algae in your tank unless you're just sitting there scrubbing all the
right.
time.
Yeah. Just get some new growth and cut off the algae ridden part once you can. Bunny Viper said this: if you have green water container and you would like to become a richer, more nutrient dense, darker green water, feed it the starchy rinse water from rice. Old trick from overseas. That's interesting.
Interesting.
I hadn't heard that.
That makes sense though,
Yeah.
because I mean, a lot of stuff would feed on that starch.
Hmm.
Interesting. I might have to try that out with my. I might try green water again.
Yeah. And I mean, just eat a lot of rice. Who doesn't love rice with their meals?
I had rice tonight.
I
I have
had
rice
rice
most
yesterday.
nights.
It is a staple. Hello, Susan. Welcome to the live stream. It's good to see you.
Well,
Let's see. So a green spot, I think that's pretty much it. I mean, it's definitely too much lighting and nutrients. We'll get into more details at another time as to what might actually be causing it. But as far as how to get rid of it, scrape it off the glass and try not to, make your adjustments. Be it fertilizer, and it's not always. Here's the thing: it's not always use less fertilizer. Less fertilizer could be the problem. It might be that your plants need more nutrients and they're not getting enough. And so the algae is able to benefit from what is there that the plants aren't using. So, it's that triangle.
it's
We need to
definitely the
make a
balance.
graphic. It's that
And
balance.
for any tank, whether you're using plants or water changes or a combination, to beat algae, you really want your nutrient export to be rapid enough that it doesn't give algae a chance to take hold.
Yep.
Which is just it's all about finding a balance of, okay, my plants take out this much nutrients, and they're you know I don't have to do as many water changes, or I have to do smaller water changes. It just is all about finding that right balance of nutrient removal and then also your lighting.
Yeah, and that's a great point. You might need to be doing a few extra water changes during this time.
Mhm.
Um, you do need to watch if your nitrates are above 40. You probably and you've got algae issues. You probably don't want them around 40.
Yeah,
Um, that 20 is more of a sweet spot for your plants. Try to hold it at 20 until you get rid of the algae, um, and then maybe you might be able to push it up a little bit as you increase uh, lighting or CO2. So
yeah, and it
it's
really
just all about
depends.
that balance.
Yeah, and it depends too on what plants you have, but that's a whole nother
Yeah.
stream that we could do.
Right.
Different plants are gonna uptake different amounts of nutrients at different rates, and it's honestly pretty cool. Like some
Yeah.
tanks I have more epiphytes in. They grow slower. I have less. I dose less, or need less nutrients in light.
Yeah. Well, I struggled for a long time with my Anubias and well, really the Anubias for the most part, and trying to do stem plants or my Amazon swords, something a little more fast growing, because I was getting enough nutrients and light for the fast growing plants, but it was too much for the Anubias. And then when
Yeah,
I would dial it down to where the Anubias wasn't getting algae, I was starving off the other plants. And so finding that balance is not always easy. I do feel like it can be found. For me, the answer was shading the Anubias.
Mhm.
I shoved it underneath the Amazon swords and allowed the sword to enjoy the light. And the Anubius has never looked better. It's huge. It's actually almost to the top of the tank now, which is just dumb. I don't understand why it's doing that. It doesn't like the light. Why is it stretching up there? But that's what it's decided to do. It's it's not a very smart plant. All right, moving on to the next one because we've got a few more here. I've seen this one in the chat already. This is probably the one that most of us have dealt with the most, I would think, but that is hair algae, also known as green hair algae, and maybe you've heard it called thread algae. And this is a category. All these are categories, but this is a category that it may not look exactly like either of the examples you see on my screen right now. A lot of times it's green. Um, I don't I don't know that it can be red. I think anything that's not green is probably staghorn. But anyway, not anything because staghorn looks different. If it's kind of fuzzy looking, almost like a moss, sometimes people will mistake it for a moss. It's probably green hair algae. The micro pond that I had on the back patio, hair algae for miles. It ended up getting way too much light where it was located. The plants did not outcompete the algae, and I was constantly out there with a toothbrush cleaning out hair algae. Actually, most of the time I would just pull it out by the handful, and then I would use the toothbrush at the end. But yeah, the plants didn't have a chance once that stuff got a hold of it, and it can happen. Just like this second, the little picture down here where you see it. That I can't help but wonder what happened with this tank. Like, did somebody move out for a while? Was someone go to another state and then come back and find that, oh, my timer got locked on and the lights have been on the entire time I was gone?
Green algae is definitely, or the hair algae is wild when it takes over. It's honestly pretty cool.
Yeah, it does look neat, and that is what was in that one tank that I said was very cool looking. They were combing it over. Um, one thing that I've heard, and this is I couldn't believe it when I read it, but when I started looking for pictures of hair algae, I could see it happening. Apparently, at one point, there were, I don't know if it was stores or people online, but they were selling hair algae as moss, and so people were buying cups of hair algae to put in their tank, and that's low down.
Oh man, that is bad.
That is
That's real
bad.
bad.
But I could see why someone who doesn't know their moss might fall for that, though.
Yeah,
I wanted to back up. I see Only Oscars is here. Welcome, Only Oscars. It's good to have you. And also, X Genetics Legacy Radio is here as well. Thank you for joining us in the chat. It's great
welcome,
to
welcome.
have you here. And I believe I saw, oh, that was everybody. All right. I was about to say, I thought I saw someone else. Only Oscar says, anyone want some moss? Let's see. So yeah, with this, you just got to remove it, and thankfully it is usually easy to remove. Like I said, the toothbrush. That's the
Yeah,
best method when you've got it in the tank. Just take the bristle head, stick it down in there, treat it like spaghetti, and get it all through those bristles and pull it out. That's the best thing to do. And then like everything else we're saying, try to find balance in your nutrients and your light.
it's definitely a pretty fun algae to remove. I will say, if you've got like a lot of it and you're just sitting there twirling it, it's almost kind of cathartic
Yeah.
to do that. It's really satisfying because it pulls off, and you get to see what remains underneath.
I've never experienced that. I'm going to have to like have a cup of coffee next time I have to remove it and just see if I could chill out with it.
It's pretty nice.
I'm going to let you talk about this one. I have had this algae as well. I know that you've been dealing with it, so you've got
Yes,
some recent experience. It almost makes me think, like when I look at it, it's hair algae, but it's not. There's a little bit of a difference in how it is. Its structure is a little bit different.
yeah, and it's honestly, I'm kind of the more I'm looking at it, it almost looks like a mix of staghorn and like a black beard type
Yeah.
algae. I've got a little funk going on. This is in a tank I set up about 2 months ago, and I'm still working through some issues with it, just because I've got a lot, like in this picture, a lot of Bucephalandria and other epiphytes. So it's a different type of tank than I've set up before, and had some excess nutrients. Wasn't keeping up with water changes, and that started taking over. I think a lot of it was lighting, but this is very stubborn algae, and I do not like it at all. Um, Staghorn is pretty interesting. It'll have like branches on it, and there's not really any good ones that you can see in this photo, because I will say this is actually, it's turning red and starting to die off, because of I use some hydrogen peroxide on it. It's the only way I've really found to get rid of it. I basically dipped the plant and then added it back in the tank. But it's annoying, and I manually remove as much as I can, but I don't like snipping off large pieces of the boost.
Right. Yeah, I've never really been able to remove it. Like you can get the longer strands, the stuff that's growing away from the leaf, but there's still a lot on the leaf anytime I have had this, and I've had to lose the leaf. And I know with slow growing plants like the Anubias and the Buse, you don't want to have to do that. But um, the peroxide dip does work. You got to be careful. Be careful with how much you use, how long you do it. Do your research. I did a ton of research and still melted back everything. So just be careful with that. It does work. I don't know if there's any bottle treatments that work for staghorn. I've never tried it.
The stuff like Excel I've found will generally work,
It
because
does.
it's a
Okay.
glutaraldehyde. But from my understanding, the hydrogen peroxide is a little bit of a less aggressive treatment than that, and plus
Yeah.
it's $1 for a bottle. So
Right. Why not?
that's more of just an economical decision. But
Yeah.
I do a brief synopsis on that is I do a very diluted mixture, and we'll do a dip for like say a minute, and I'll check the plant. Because generally you can tell pretty quick if you've overdone it. Um,
Yeah.
and it's just really just trying to figure out the sweet spot of keeping it in the dip as long as possible, but not hurting the plant.
Yeah.
But
So
it
I
is.
wanted there's
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say there's a couple comments I want to go back to, but finish your thought before I do it.
I've completely lost my thought now.
Okay. Nancy B says, I found my first staghorn a couple of weeks ago on the very top of a few pieces of vow. So just cut it out. Um, I think so, because anytime I've tried to treat vow, it's so finicky, it just melts back anyway.
Yeah, those leaves will really melt back if you do like a hydrogen peroxide
Hmm. Yeah.
application on it. So for like example, I've got a crypt that also has gotten staghorn on it, and similar situation. It's on the very top pieces, right up next to the light, and it's in fast flow, which are two things I believe will cause staghorn, or can.
Mm-hmm.
That's an environment it thrives in. So I just snip
Mm-hmm.
those off because they're so hard to give rid of.
And it can spread, it can move about in the tank. So getting it out of the tank's probably the best course of action with this one. Some of the others don't spread as quickly, but I feel like anytime I've had this one, it has moved. Bunny Viper asked a question about my Cory. So I'm gonna jump on it real quick. Notice you pulled Cory eggs. I've decided to leave mine in a tank without the parents. Suggestions for first foods or any other help would be greatly appreciated. And we have both experienced this recently, and I've been preparing for the new fry that just started actually hatching today. I have Sarah's, it's a fry food that they have, and it was amazing on the last batch that I raised. So I definitely use that. I also like to take Extreme Nano, and if you, I mean, just a little rub on the finger, and it's a powder. So it's another good one. And then of course when they get big enough, I start giving them I don't do baby brine for live baby brine, but I do the frozen baby brine when they get big enough to do that. They also loved the banana worms. That was really one of the staples of the diet for my last batch, which I currently don't have a culture of, so I'm going to have to consider doing that. I do have some grindle worms, which are a little bit bigger, so I'm not sure how old. You fed yours grindle worms, didn't you, or did you use micro worms?
I fed micro worms.
Okay.
Uh, I fed white worms, which I believe go a little bit bigger than grindles. I started feeding white worms after like 3 weeks, four
Hmm.
weeks, because for the longest time they were like the worms were bigger than them. So
Yes. Yeah.
I fed micro worms for a while, and then I fed some pellets. Like I crushed up some pellet food, and fed them that like a little shrimp stick, pretty much. I crushed it up.
Yeah. And also at one point, I started breaking up extreme scrapers and dropping in there as well. I just didn't leave them for very long. But I mean, that tank that I have them in now, if you've got a tank that's been set up, it's probably not going to hurt anything for it to be there for a few hours. But yeah, one thing that I wholeheartedly believe is giving them a varied diet is key to success.
Definitely.
Let's see if there's Regina Phalanges, more flow. They say it'll be great. Not if you're battling certain algae.
100%. Looks like a little further up, Zen Ginger says she had to completely black out the tank for almost
Yeah.
3 weeks. And oh, you didn't want to dip the crypts. So with crypts, I've actually dosed or spot dosed hydrogen peroxide when I'm doing a water change. So there's not much flow. So the hydrogen peroxide kind of sits in that same area for a second, and then it basically dissipates um, the oxygen in water essentially from my understanding. So it's not
Yeah, it
very,
breaks down.
it breaks down pretty quick. So you can dose a decent bit, but just keep, I like spot dosing because it's less aggressive than dosing a whole tank.
Yeah. I've been using hydrogen peroxide on my Cory eggs instead of everybody says methylene blue and other other chemicals, but I've just been using hydrogen peroxide. I found a mixture that seemed, or not a mixture, a ratio that seems to work for me. And that is a drop per cup. And so far I've not had any losses on this batch to fungus.
I'm going to have to try that out because my last set of Cory eggs got very fungused.
Hmm.
And I lost like basically all of them.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's see. All right, let's go to the next one. We're over. How did
We
that
are
happen?
over.
Well, we just got two more, and there's not much to say about BBA. Nobody ever has to deal with it, and it's so just. I mean, it's so cool looking. Why wouldn't you want it growing in your tank? This was the thorn in my side with my tank for the longest time. I've had a lot of issues with BBA, and it was a long, um, hard fought battle to figure out how to get rid of it in my tank. I will say there's still some at the top of my tank where my spray bar is from my canister filter. There's blackbeard algae on that. There's not a lot on the tank or on the plants. There's currently some showing up on the Anubias, so I've turned the lights down a little bit, but it's just dialing in that light. I've heard all kinds of different things about, again, we've mentioned flow already. Whether or not there's a dead spot and no flow there, but I've had it growing right in front of a sponge filter or on a sponge filter. So that would be too much flow, not enough. Um, so yeah, phosphates. I've tracked my phosphates. I've just all kinds of stuff. It really just boiled down to finding balance between my light and nutrients.
Yeah, Blackbeard is definitely not fun. I've got some of it in that tank as well.
Mm-hmm.
And like you were saying about your spray bar, I always get mine on the outlet of my pump. And I really think it just grows in every environment. Low
Yeah.
flow, high flow. It's really annoying. And hydrogen peroxide is another way I found to get rid of it. Really, the easiest way besides just manual removal is what I do first, and then what I can't get, I may spot dose.
Yeah, there's people in the chat talking about how high flow's definitely not been they have high flow, so the lack of high flow has not been the cause for them as well. Um, and then I saw Squad Cap 4 says, do some meds bring about algae? Some kind of parasite got into my community, killing a few fish. I'm medicated with Paraclins and Maricin 2. A week later, Blackbeard infestation. Um, I don't know why that would cause it. As far as so, those are both treating for bacterial.
So, off the top of my head, I can think of a couple different things that may have caused.
Okay,
I don't know if either of those medications could slow down plant growth. Um, you also say that it killed a few fish. You could have had
spike.
some excess a spike in nutrients from that, and that would probably be one of the two things I would think could have happened. But that's just my best guess.
Yeah, yeah. And the thing is, if something like that caused it to show up, if you don't do anything drastic and make any drastic changes, just keep doing what you were always doing before it was there, I think you should see it, shrink back. If anything, and we're about to, well, I guess we're on it now. If anything with BBA, the peroxide treatment has been the one thing that worked the best for me. It's not a solution to rid yourself of BBA, but it can help you get it off of certain areas, like my Anubias. I would use it around the edges of the Anubias because it was constantly growing there. Um, and that allowed me to save those leaves and not lose all of them. But so, you can do that. But here's the thing about doing that: you've got to be patient with that as well and pace yourself. Because if you put a lot of peroxide in there, you might hurt something else. So don't
Yeah.
just start pouring it in. But even if you're taking a pipette and spraying, the exact amount ratio in a certain spot just to kill it there, when you kill that and it dies off, it will produce ammonia. So, you may just be feeding, like if you kill off a lot of Blackbeard algae all at once, you may just be feeding the problem and have it show up somewhere else in the tank. And I think that's what a lot of us do. We start, throwing the Excel into the tank to kill it off, and it just produces a spike. And then you end up with it, again, it doesn't go away. I think there's some validity to that.
Yeah, definitely. I think doing, being consistent as possible with just tweaking things. No, the way I prefer to do is I'm constantly changing like one thing about my tank.
Mm-hmm.
I'm having this issue, so this week I reduced my lighting down to, X number of hours. That didn't work. Next week I'm going to do an additional little bit of a water change, just try and figure out what it is that I'm missing from that balance.
Yeah. Small changes, don't do anything drastic. I think oftentimes, I've done it a number of times. I bring on a bigger problem when I try to fix something because I just throw too much at it. And, it's not really algae related, but one of the most recent times was I, I had an issue where I lost a bunch of Sturbi Corridoras, and then I had an opportunity to get some more. They started thinning on me. I started throwing medicine on them because I didn't want to lose them again, and I killed them. I mean, that's just what happened. I did too much. So we can do too much and cause more problems. If your tank didn't have BBA before, my recommendation is try to hold steady where you normally would be. Check those parameters, make sure you don't have a spike. Like Tanner said, you may have had some dead fish in there that, the ammonia went up and caused more issues. So maybe, just check your parameters, make sure that's good. I saw Big Shrimp and said, laugh if you want, but I have a local fish store that has been running the same tank for 40 years. They have massive chunks of wood covered in BBA, and it's pretty cool looking. I have seen some images of some cool looking BBA. I just still think that's a sick joke. I mean, I would be afraid to put it in a system. I mean, I'm sure every one of my systems already have it, so it's not like a big risk. But if I didn't have it, I wouldn't want to put it in there.
I definitely wouldn't. It is. I think Mitch and I can agree. It's been the bane of our existence for
Yeah.
some plants. It's a really annoying algae.
Yes, it is. Squad Captain 4 says Marison does have a melting effect on some plants, I found out. So, yeah, I mean, the mixture of the meds may have caused a little bit of an issue, and maybe it stunted the plants enough for the BBA to outcompete it. So, yeah, I would definitely do some water changes and check the parameters. So people are already talking about cyanobacteria. We're not there yet. Yeah. So BBA, I think we could have multiple episodes on this one. This is from my tank. This is it growing on a piece of driftwood. That piece of driftwood, that spot is very high in the tank, and lighting has been the biggest thing for me. It's grown in places where high in the tank and on plants that are slow growing. So like I said, I shoved all the slow growing plants underneath stuff so that it was kind of shaded out, and lowered my lighting, which meant that I haven't been able to keep some plants that I want to. But the BBA is resided. It's I don't have problems with it. There's still some, but I don't have problems with it. And if I stay on course, I feel like it'll eventually not be a problem, and maybe I can start raising my light again. But I haven't treated with anything else in a while. I haven't felt like I needed to, because it looks all right. Anything else on BBA?
Yeah, I think treating it, getting rid of it is one thing, but like I think there's just a really needs to be an emphasis on that. Just because you got treated and got killed off that part of it, it's still going to keep coming back unless you fix the root cause. Treating
Mm-hmm.
is just like a preventative almost, or an attempt at a preventative.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. With
that's
all of these, balance,
all.
finding balance, except for this last one. Cyanobacteria, often called blue-green algae, is not algae at all. And I've seen people in the chat already mention this. You're absolutely correct. It's a bacterial growth. It's a bacterial bloom. It's not always the same either. It can be, it can be a little bit different. I had this one time in the 10-gallon when I very first got in the hobby, and someone told me to treat it with erythromycin, and it took care of it. So Marison, you are going to have to treat this because it's a bacteria. It's not a growth of something that's out competing your plants. It's a growth of bacteria.
Yeah, no, I believe too. They are. I may be wrong, but I think they're a photosynthetic bacteria.
Probably, yeah.
So cyanobacteria are a little interesting too because they're one of the bacteria that can cause a harmful algae bloom in high concentrations. And they release something called a cyanotoxin, which
Yeah.
is very harmful to fish and can actually, cause fish death. Um, Typically does not get to that extent in your home aquarium, but
Right.
that's just a little tidbit about it.
Yeah, I heard, I don't know the validity of this, but I heard a story about someone who went swimming in a water hole somewhere. I think it was in Florida, and they ended up in some cyanobacteria of some sort, some kind of bacteria in the water, and their dog died from it, like from the exposure. So it definitely, now again, It's probably just a silly Facebook post, but it still makes you stop and think. This would be some bad stuff to come across.
Yeah, like I think Dave's saying, it can affect humans too,
Yeah,
which is pretty wild. Because I believe it also is been pretty bad for. It can be bad for deer and other animals that drink the water.
right,
It can impact them. So it's kind of some nasty stuff. But like Mitch said, dose like erythromycin or like some type of antibacterial. One thing that you have to be careful with that is because it will kill off good and bad bacteria.
right.
Uh, so I would have some extra filter media or biomedia on hand that maybe you could keep separate and then add in, after you've treated.
Yeah,
You can also do manual removal by just siphoning it out, but it's kind of hard to get rid of.
yeah. And I have not looked, I don't remember what the treatment for it was. I would imagine it was just a regular dosing of that medication because that does include water changes because you're going to want to, be removing it as you go. And you don't want to use too much of the medication because of the inhabitants. What a yawn, apparently. It's late. We're normally. I did want to point out that even in this picture, if you look up on the top right hand corner, I think there might be some algae in there as well. So this tank's dealing with a few things. Um, but yeah, this stuff's nasty. You're going to have to treat it, do some research on it. I think I saw, was it Bunny Viper? No, it was Regina. Phalanges says, smells like rotting vegetables in a container sitting in the sun for a week. Ugh. Yeah. And Nancy B says it can be dangerous in lakes. So yeah, I've heard some stuff about that. That's some nasty stuff. I don't want that in my tank for sure.
Hmm. Yeah, and
Probably do something drastic.
what Nancy B says is good. You can use less, like 1/4 regular dose, and it will still kill it.
Okay.
Remove all you can manually first, which I think is some pretty good advice right there.
But not with your hand.
Siphon it out.
Yeah. Siphon it or use a glove, one of those long gloves that reaches down to the bottom of your tank. Don't stick your hand in there. Become like the toxic crusader. So that's just kind of an intro. And then should you fear it, as long as it's not cyanobacteria, you shouldn't fear it. But we're going to spend a little bit more time in the coming weeks on some of these, maybe a little more in depth, diving into treatments and things like that. We just wanted to kind of throw out some common algae and talk about maybe a little bit about what causes them and how to deal with them. There's some great resources out there already. If you're already online and you're watching this because you've got an outbreak, um, just don't make a drastic change. Don't start throwing things out or scrubbing things, and please don't get bleach. Just take your time, small changes. It's going to be okay. It's just going to look not how you want it to for a few days, maybe a few weeks, but you'll get it back under control. It's small changes.
Definitely.
All right. Well, that is going to be it for us this week. We are way over. We've joked about going till 10 and we've done it.
We
You're
have.
frozen on my end. I don't know if you're frozen for everybody else or not, but I don't see you moving. I still hear you though, just so you know.
Okay, well, I guess let's see if I can. Did that? No, I still look frozen. Great.
Okay, so it's not just
I'll
me.
just I'll just stop
That's all right. We're
the frozen picture.
Yeah, that's all right. We're ending. I am going to get back on the horn with Comcast and see what I can do on my end. I dropped right as I was logging in, so but for some reason I have a hard time saying bye. Thank you all. We still
Yes, thank
have quite a few in the chat. Thank you for hanging out with us. I know we went long. You all are great. Love just sitting here and chatting with you. Sorry for everyone who we didn't get to your comment. It's very hard to have these conversations and hit every comment, but we're trying to get better. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for hanging out. We appreciate all of you. And for those of you on the replay, thanks. If you would, subscribe, comment, like, the live stream, that would be awesome. I really appreciate that. And we hope to see you next time. Stay scruffy.